I grew up with. I'm from Montego Bay. I grew up in a cool, laid-back society. And yes, you struggled with your homosexuality, but you did not fear being attacked. Since this year, we've seen an upsurge in the attacks, and we know why. Because we've filed the cases, and in response, the church has launched a petition, which is sent around. I think they now have 30,000 signatures, and that might not seem a lot, but when you think that the population is 2.8 million, that's significant. And they've also had island-wide marches, and we've had pastors on public platforms declare that they're willing to die to prevent gay rights advancing in Jamaica. So with that kind of rhetoric being whipped up, it's not surprising that since this year, and I'm just through from July, further with the beginning of the year, since July, we've had several murders. On July 22nd, a 16-year-old youngster, Dwayne Jones, went to a street party in Montego Bay, where I grew up. And Dwayne is a trans youth, went dressed as female, and was dancing with a gay friend. Dwayne went to the gay friend, dancing with a gay friend. And one of Dwayne's church sisters, someone he goes to church with, saw him and outed him to the mob. They turned on Dwayne, they stabbed Dwayne, shot Dwayne, and proceeded to dump the body in a nearby ditch and went on dancing. The police found the body at 5 o'clock the next morning. That's from July 22nd to now. There's been no arrests. It's a public murder, no arrest. On August 1, a police officer who is suspected of being gay was downtown Kingston, and he was mobbed by the community because they said he was gay. And his fellow police had to come and fire shots in the air and tear gas into the crowd so this police officer could escape. We've had home invasions since then. I think what was most egregious was, for me, last week Tuesday night, some homeless MSM who now live in a sewer in Kingston because they've been chased out of every home they've inhabited. And when they're chased out, sometimes the homes are then torn down after they leave so that they can't reinvest. These homeless men who have sex with men are now living in sewers. And the police went there and burned all their belongings. And when the young men went to report what is essentially an arson and trespass, the police chased them out and said, you need to come back with the names and addresses of all the people who attacked you before we'll even open an investigation. So we then had to go with our lawyer, force the police officer to take the report, but we know nothing is going to come of it. So what is frustrating for us is that these attacks are happening, both by the citizens and to a lesser extent now by the police, we admit. But the police are less inclined to do anything. Have there been improvements in Jamaica since the beginning of the year? Yes, I'm not going to deny that there have been improvements. We applaud what the Prime Minister said during the election speech. Certainly applaud that. But we also know that since then, she has been very hesitant to say anything more because of the backlash she got from the church. We applaud the fact that the Commissioner of Police has issued a directive that LGBT are not to be discriminated on the grounds of sexual orientation. That's a clear directive. However, we know that that hasn't translated down to the front lines. We certainly applaud the fact that after the death of Dwayne Jones, the Minister of Justice actually condemned it. He publicly condemned the murder, which in my recollection is the first time a Minister of Justice has ever condemned a homophobic murder. We applaud that the Minister of Health has said that the anti-sodomy law has to go because it is contributing to our HIV epidemic. And just to give you a synopsis of our HIV epidemic, Jamaica currently has a situation where 1 in 3 MSM has HIV. It is the highest HIV prevalence among MSM worldwide. But that's not the end of the story. 60% of these MSM also have sex with women, because our society forces them into these clandestine relationships. And we have clear evidence that there is now a bridging of the epidemic between the two populations. It's frightening for us to consider as HIV activists because Jamaica has now graduated into what is called a middle-income country status. So we are no longer going to be qualified for HIV and AIDS funding from the Global Fund. Now, the reality is most of that money is skewed towards a very narrow, as most income distributions are. The very rich and very, very poor. But overall, we are now middle income, and so we're losing that funding. So we have an epidemic that we are barely able to control. It's certainly out of control among the MSM population. And we're not allowing MSM to form their own relationships unmolested by the law. We're not allowing MSM to feel unlimited, going to access prevention, treatment, care, and support intervention. And at the same time, we're having MSM being targeted by the community, by the police, and there's very little tangible that's happening. Where do we go from here? Well, we are currently in litigation. We have filed, sometimes I forget how many, but we filed an Inter-American Commission petition, and right after that, we realized that we could also file a domestic petition to challenge the anti-sodomy law. So there's a case before the Supreme Court, which will be heard next year, November. We also tried to air a tolerance ad, just calling for respect for the rights of gays. Very simple ad. And the television station said they couldn't air it because it would anger the churches and also it would be supporting an illegal activity. So we took them to court. The case was heard, and we're awaiting that decision. Because we know that visibility, education comes through visibility, and that will help to show that we're regular people. That will help to reduce the level of homophobia. We're also challenging the immigration laws of Belize and Trinidad, and that case will be heard November 12th and 13th of this year. And we're looking for a case in Dominica. We just supported the challenge to the anti-sodomy law in Belize, and we are trying to find other cases that we can use to push the agenda, because what we realize is once the cases start going, there's an opportunity for discussion, for dialogue, for people to really see what the issue is. Because, I mean, you'd be amazed at some of the rhetoric we hear, even in the court. There's one group that has joined against this domestic challenge, claiming that if we repeal the anti-sodomy law, it's going to lead to the abuse of boys. And we have tried to use that as a jumping off point to say, look, what we're arguing for is the review of the law so that private, consensual, adult, same-gender intimacy is no longer criminalized. So that's given us an opportunity to clarify those points. The churches, I think 13 church groups have also joined opposing this litigation. So you have 13 against 1. And they're saying that if we repeal the law, they won't be able to advocate against homosexuality anymore. We'll effectively undermine their right to free speech. We'll undermine their right to freedom of religion. And these are actual arguments which have been submitted. If you want a good laugh, I'll send them to you. They're really hilarious to read. It's like, whoa! I mean, this is a case on the issue of the law, but no, it's all we won't be able to speak.